and some other adult corrected you, well, when you got home, you got something else. So you were always on your P's and Q's. So,
Great. So, with the growing up in Mount Pleasant, having to have that respect, do you feel as though the students and the children that are here now have that same respect?
well, I do not. Um, the students, I mean, everybody spoke. Nobody wants to speak to anybody. This street has still a lot of children on it in certain places. But college students speed up and down the street, and you ask them to slow down, they ignore you, they keep going. So there's a disrespect. We wouldn't dare um, not do what an adult asked us to do. Typically, I used to have college living next to me for 3 years, and it was a nightmare. They partied all hours of the morning. Whatever they wanted to do, they did it. They had no regard for anybody else. And I got up a lot of times, um, knocked on the door, and asked them to keep it down. The first group was bad. The second group were an older group, so they were nicer. They would do things for you, you know, asked you if you need the grass cut, or generally for the third group was worse than the first group. So it was a blessing for me when the owner decided to move back. As far as um, down the lower part of the street where the college or I don't go down that way. But if I do go down, I notice that they have a lot of trash in their yard. Um, and we've always been a clean neighborhood. So I told college kids when I would have a talk with them that we were used to being clean. We didn't used to see trash on the side of the house, or we didn't used to see cigarette butts or beer cans or whatever it was. I mean, you just didn't see it. It just wasn't heard of. So today, I believe a lot of things because children are giving too much, and because they're given a whole lot, they don't respect. And respect is one of the things that they have lost, in my opinion.
So, with your view on the college students being in Mount Pleasant, how do you feel about Mount Pleasant in general and how it's being taken care of by not only the college students but the community in general with it
The
how it is
community
now?
has changed in the effect. The older folks always took pride in their property. They took pride. And taking pride means you swept the streets, you landscaped, everything was really nice. The older folks are dying off and they're selling their homes. Then you have other people moving in. They're not friendly. Um, and when you come up and you're used to seeing manicured lawns and even the gardens are manicured and then you don't see it anymore. It's a big change. It's a big change.
Let's see. So, can you tell me what it was like growing up? You have a favorite memory?
How was it growing up? Well, young ladies were not allowed to stand on the corner. You got caught on the corner, you were in a big bunch of trouble. Anybody mother would get you. Um, the young men were a little more respectful. Um, we had a good time. We had a community center. There were baseball games. There were all kinds of things there. There were weddings. There was flower shows. There were just so much, and we didn't have a lot, but we were able to make our own fun. We had hay rides. The church did different things with us, and as we got older, the young men would teach the women how to change a tire on the car because if they ever broke down, they were prepared. Some learned how to change oil, some learned to do a lot. But still, there was a time of evening. I know for myself that I wasn't allowed to be out. Came certain time it was dark, you had to be in. You had to be accountable, and if you were given a time to be in and you weren't in, well, there's the consequences behind it. We had parties. We enjoyed ourselves. They were chaperoned most of the time, but the parents didn't sit on top of you. You had yard parties, so we did things that were fun. We went to car races, movies, and anything we actually had to do around here. There was if you didn't have a car, you had to walk. That's pretty much the same today, but in my era, we walked. Parents didn't say, "Okay, I'll take you where you want to go." We walked. We wanted to go to Wayne. We walked to Wayne. So
Wow, that was rough. I don't
Yeah.
think I can imagine without SEPTA or a car.
And this
Yeah.
accident.
weather too.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's funny because we were just wondering how are we gonna get there in the rain. And my first, before I knew it was raining, we were gonna rent bikes from my school. My school let students rent out bikes. So I was gonna say we can bike it up there, but my mother, she took me to school for the last 18 years. My mother's taking me to school every single day, until I got to college. So that was the funny part of you saying that. Wow.
yeah. There was. We had a school bus. You missed the school bus? Well, and we went to school in Berwyn. I don't know if you have any concept of where Berwyn is.
General.
Um, yeah, yeah. So, yeah. So if you missed the bus, mom had to work, dad had to work. You were on your own, but you better get home and you better do your chores, and they better be done before they got home.
So, what do you think can what do you think can happen to make the community a better place than it is now?
Harmony, being a family. The community is a family. It's not a division.
Okay. How has growing up here affected your view on social issues?
I was brought up very strict. Social issues.
Can be anything. Social issues.
Well, see again, it's so different. It's who you socialize with, who was deemed appropriate. There were certain if it wasn't deemed appropriate for you to socialize with those individuals, then it just didn't happen. As I say, I was brought up with a strict household. When my parents were working and not home, my grandparents were there, and they lived down on Mount Pleasant Avenue. In fact, they lived across the street from Barbara Byrd. You're familiar with Barbara?
Yes.
I don't know if you know where Tom Tron lived, which was almost diagonally across the street is where my grandparents grew up,
Okay.
my grandparents lived. So it was just like, and for me, and I don't know personally for anybody else, at the bottom of Henry Avenue, there used to be woods, and there was a path, and I was not allowed because I lived on Fairview Avenue. That's behind where the barber shop is. That's Fairview Avenue. I had to, and I lived at the bottom of that hill, so I had to walk. And the bottom part of Fairview Avenue when I was coming up was called Black Bottom. So I had to walk the bottom of the road, and then I had to walk down the bottom of Henry Avenue all the way to the end and into the woods and follow the path in the woods to behind, that would drop me off behind my grandparents down here on Mount Pleasant Avenue, and then through my aunt's yard and into theirs. That's how I was allowed to come from the avenue.
The path.
There used to be. There's not a woods anymore. There's homes there now, so they're all gone. You need to stop that, please. Stop.
So with all the change that you've seen in the community, how well have you adjusted to it all?
Well, I just go about my business. I will wave to somebody or I'll speak to somebody, and if they do, they do. If they don't, I've spoken. People aren't as friendly. If they are as friendly, I maybe because when I come home from work, I come home and I don't venture out, especially in the wintertime. Summertime, I'm in my yard, so trying to spruce it up and make it look nice. So.
already answered a lot of my questions.
Yeah,
Stealing.
we as partners, we kind of like feed off of each other with questions. So, and as time goes on, we kind of think of more questions because, you know, as interesting as everything that you are giving us, I'm very surprised at some of your answers actually.
Really?
Yes, especially with the community answer, a lot of the community answers that we have asked you with, you know, how bringing back harmony and things like that. So my next question is, with growing up here and staying for so long, have you ever thought about leaving Mount Pleasant?
No.
No. And why is that?
Just was never an option for me. My parents, my father grew up in both my parents were raised in Mount Pleasant. They married in Mount Pleasant, even though when they died, they had moved to other states. But I like where I live. I like the community. We're close enough to the mall, to the public highways, but we're nestled enough that we don't have to be involved with a lot of unnecessary traffic or unnecessary noise. So we're kind of nestled. No, I haven't ever thought about moving. I've, like my mom moved to Virginia. I did the Virginia scene. I just didn't like it. This was home. It was home. So
So with now now this you saying that this being home, how do you feel about the surrounding neighborhood of Mount Pleasant, such as Radnor and and Villanova being around Mount Pleasant? How do you feel the economy has looked at Mount Pleasant?
they've always been there.
Always.
It's always been there. When I grew up, Villanova was there. Radnor, we we're at border points. I mean, we butt up to each other. Same rivalry between the schools are there as they were. I went to Conestoga, so it really hasn't changed for me. Cabrini's always been there. Eastern College has always been there, but it wasn't Eastern University, it was Eastern College. And I used to work there when it was Eastern College. So for me, I don't think the economy has changed that because it's always been there. I see that they've grown as far as, I guess, how many students may be there or may not be there because you see a lot more dorms and stuff. So a lot of the country, a lot of the homeliness or the open stuff, it's being taken over by population or the need for growth. So they've always been there.
So do you think that the need for growth is the reason why a lot of people have forgotten about Mount Pleasant?
I don't think people have forgotten about Mount Pleasant. I don't really think a lot of people knew about Mount Pleasant. It's like I had spoken with a lady that I've known for maybe 6 years through church. And in speaking with her, she grew up in Ardmore. And if somebody asked her where she went to church, she said, Wayne. And not knowing, and I said, oh, and different people that she said, I said, well, they grew up here in Mount Pleasant. She would look at me and she said, Mount Pleasant? This is Mount Pleasant? So the community of Mount Pleasant's always been there. But people didn't really recognize it if you say you're going to Wayne. Well, where in Wayne? Or some of the older ones who grew up here, who had attachments to anybody they went to school with, would say, oh, you're from Mount Pleasant. So if you don't know it's called Mount Pleasant, then, you just wouldn't have a clue.
So with being here, would you think it would be better, say, if students such as myself or other colleges would come out and help the neighborhood grow back to its former, I don't want to say glory, but then I want to say, back to...
Well, it's not so much glory. It's the unity. I think we've lost perspective over the years with the economy. People don't take the time because they're more about, I've got enough to do. My schedule's tight enough. I don't have time to go help that individual that needs their house painted. I'm sorry they're old and they need some help, but I don't have time. So if you don't have time for the older folks, and you gear yourself up for that when you get older, or when your parents get older. Now you have a grandmother
Yes.
who's 80 some years old,
Yes.
and she's in a community or in an area where I'm sure you would hope and think that somebody your age, if she needed something, might be willing to help her. Well, that's the same scenario here. The old folks are dying off, and there's a lot of them that can't do things, and it comes to a pride thing. Older folks don't ask. They have a pride thing about it. I'm not going to ask. If they see I need to have it done, then they're going to help me, but I'm not going to ask them to do it.
Yeah, that's how my grandmother is. She doesn't particularly ask us, her grandchildren, to do things for her. She believes that if we see it needs to be done, then we'll do it.
And I'm finding with children today, if you don't point it out, they don't see it. So, and when we grew up, you better see it, not have it pointed out. It was, so. And since I was brought up so much old school, my grandkids really get, they have a problem, They need to be asked a lot. They need to be told a lot. When we grew up, when you came home from school, you had chores every day. Not one day, but every day. And you were accountable for doing those chores. And you had to get them done. You had to get them done. And the consequences behind it were great. They weren't, after a while you figured it out. You figured it out. So, yeah.
It's funny because myself growing up, I'm not going to say I had chores, but I had, I guess you would say,
responsibilities.
Yeah, I guess responsibilities. My mother, she told me to, take out the trash and to just say, bring your laundry downstairs, I guess you could say. And it's funny because I don't want to say I grew up with my grandmother, but I learned a lot from my grandmother, like how to cook and things like that. I guess, like along those names, like I learned the basic needs of what I needed to know to survive now. So, from hearing everything that you're saying about the college students living here, what is your general overview of my generation or of our generation now?
And how old are you?
I'm 19.
I'm 20.
Well, I have a 19-year-old / almost 20-year-old granddaughter who's going to college. She goes to Drexel. And I'm very proud of her because she's putting herself through college. She's working. So it depends on the individual. You can't target any individual in an age bracket because they're all different. They're all different individuals, and their perspective on life is different from maybe yours to his. Your thought patterns might run a little similar, but you're humans and you're all different. So being different, that's what makes things go around. But there are some that are different, and when they get away from home and go to college, they forget their upbringing. They forget. When you're home with mom and dad or grandmom, you knew you had rules. And when they get away, well, I don't have to listen anymore because I'm not under their roof. And you see a lot of that. And I asked one college young man one time, I said, when you're home, is this the way you present yourself? Is this the way you represent your parents being out in the world? They brought you up differently, I'm sure. So it's not targeted to any individual. It's their perception or their individuality of how they deem things, or they may feel, I'm free now. I'm going to do exactly what I want. And in doing that, cause a little problem.
So, do you think that the parents have a deal with that to how their sons or daughters act in a way, or do you think it's just all in the perception of that one person?
You can have a kid brought up very strict, and you can have a kid not brought up strict, but they're individuals. That kid that's brought up strict may be out of character when he's not home, and that kid that is not brought up strict, is let to do whatever he wants to do, may be totally opposite. He sees life, the value of life. I'm out on my own. Okay, I've got to make it for myself. I've got to make my own name. I'm the individual, and who I present myself to be is going to be who I am. and that's how the world's going to deem me.
So I was gonna say you remind me a lot of my grandmother. I can understand. And the reason why I say this is because I remember being in my grandmother's house, like playing with my toys and being on the computer as I grew up. Because my grandmother, she lived in Germantown,
Okay.
in Philadelphia. That's where I'm from, and I remember that going over there. That's particularly where the streets I was raised on.
Mm-hmm.
So now, how do you feel about your grandchildren being raised on the streets of Mount Pleasant?
The only big concern I had now is the cars. They're so fast. They don't have any regard for a child. I mean, they can be going almost 40, 50 miles from the bottom of that hill to the top of that top stop sign, and know they got to stop, and all of a sudden they just stop. So what if a kid darts in the street? What if an animal darts in the street? What if? You know, the traffic is it's always been a dead end street, except for we've got a circle now where you just had to turn around on the grass or on somebody's driveway to get back up the street. But it's a speed issue for me. Nobody wants to drive slow. Everybody's in a hurry to get to a dead end street.
So, do you think parents, going back on what Greg said, do you think parents these days are doing as much as they should to raise their child?
You can't really expound on what you feel a parent should do because it's parent. Keep in mind, a parent that was brought up by strict parents may not be as strict with their children as their parents were. So it's an individual thing. It's how husband and wife agree to raise their children, what they feel is best. Yeah, they may have mom and dad in their ears, but these are my kids. I need to raise my kids the best that I can, the way that I like to have them raised.
So now, other than the speed issue, I remember earlier in our interview you said about the partying. Has the partying continued since?
The partying has only gotten under control because of the new ordinance that was put in. I feel if there was an ordinance for there to try to, it shouldn't have to have been an ordinance in the beginning. Everybody should have been able to live quietly and peacefully, and have a good time. Because when we came up, you went in somebody's backyard, you had a barbecue, and sometimes it lasted all weekend. But you respected the older folks. You respected your neighbor. And there was no trash all over the street. They were neat.
So now that the years, now that you've seen how Mount Pleasant has changed from when you first grew up here, and now that you're living here and raising your grandchildren, do you see that there is a change for the better in Mount Pleasant, that it can happen?
I don't see a positive change. I just don't see a positive change. People aren't friendly. They're just not friendly.
Now, do you think that besides the friendly part, if that changes, do you think that there could be a better change for it?
Well, Mount Pleasant has always been a small community. Children today aren't staying. They grow up and they get out because it's always been quiet, boring, nothing to do Mount Pleasant. When I was coming up, we had plenty to do, and we still lived in the boring, quiet Mount Pleasant. Kids today have a different outlook on what life should be.
That's actually pretty different than me, because me living in the city, you know how they say so much to do. I actually love being out here, because it's pretty quiet here, and I like that. And then I tell my mom that me being out here and then going back home is kind of like it's kind of like I get the best of both worlds because then I can go and have a city, then I can come back and just
Yeah.
be like really.
I don't particularly go in the city a lot. I have gone in there. My thing is, I ain't found nothing there. I haven't lost anything there. My sister, she grew up in the city, so she calls me the country bumpkin. I play in the worms. I play in the dirt. I do all that. She didn't do any of that. So I like quiet. And as I get older, I like more quiet. But as you can hear, there's not a lot of quiet.
I must say, you remind me of my grandmother. She's 84 and still kicking. So with my next question is that do you think that Mount Pleasant will disappear as time goes on? Like, say, in about 30, 40 years, do you think Mount Pleasant will disappear?
It's a big possibility. Because as those who have grown up have moved away, their children haven't even experienced the life of growing up in Mount Pleasant or what it was to be in a community such as this. So, yes, it's very possible that it may disappear from the minds of individuals, not so necessarily the place, but the minds.
So, do you think that, I know I've asked the question before, but do you think that...
It's a trick question?
No, it's not a trick question. No, it's not a trick question. Do you think that with, say, the mindset of others around Mount Pleasant, besides the friendliness and besides the mindset, what else could be done to keep Mount Pleasant a community in itself?
I never really thought about that. I don't know. I really don't have a positive answer for that. I'm just old school. And I don't see it going back to old school. So progress is good. I don't knock progress, but it has its place. It has its place.
Do you feel as though that progress has knocked out the tradition of what Mount Pleasant was before?
I don't know if it was a traditional thing. It was just home. It's where your comfort zone was. It's where your roots were. There's not a lot of roots for a lot of people anymore because they're either dying off or they're moving away. So the Mount Pleasant of my day, no, in 10 years, 15 years, it may be just not there.
So now, with growing up here and as knowledgeable as you are, what advice can you give to us as students to maintain, say, our sense of harmony with each other and our sense of community growing?
Well, you must respect yourself. And in respecting yourself will help you respect those around you. Be a mentor to somebody who needs mentoring because not everybody's as privileged as you may be. Somebody along the line, some kid along the line might even just need to see a smile from your face and not a seriousness or the bustleness of school. School can be fun. School is a challenge. School is work. But don't forget who you are and where you came from. Don't forget your roots. Don't ever forget your roots because they're important. You can pass on your grandmother to your children, and your children can pass on your grandmother. The history is within yourself. So within yourself, you need to be true to yourself and remember those teachings. Though some days they may not be as you would like them to be, but remember the love of it. Remember it was all done in love. And in that projection of that love, you give the love.
I think that's from The Lion King, too.
Hmm?
Sounds familiar.
Oh, really? Huh?
I
I
I've
don't
never
know.
heard
I
that.
like
That
it
was
though.
great.
It was.
So we are coming to kind of the end of our interview a little bit.
Okay,
So,
has it been a half an hour?
yeah.
Uh-oh. You see my hair. Should have came when my hair was done.
So what? So our final question to you is that: is there anything that we should have asked you?
Um, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I try to be true to myself. I try to be as truthful as I can be. Um, but to me, one of the questions, and maybe some people don't care about this, but I believe your church is the core. Your upbringing in the church means a lot. A lot of children, a lot of young men or young women go off now. I'm sure your grandmother had you sitting up on the pew, maybe the front pew, and she watched you from the choir box, and you didn't mess up one bit. A lot of those values have left. A lot of them have left. Life is just. So if I would say, what didn't you ask me? I don't know. What didn't you ask me? You didn't ask me about what it meant to be a child growing up where you had to go to church. You had to go to church. You had to go to church. It was fine for me to have to go to church because church is the core of who I am. I made my kids go to church, and my kids, they didn't go to church. They didn't go nowhere else. Sunday came, they didn't go to church. They weren't out Sunday afternoon. I believe the foundation that a lot of individuals have gotten away from, they're forgetting God. They're forgetting to incorporate God in their life. They're forgetting the values of how the elders grew up and who they trusted in to get them through some tough stuff. They've forgotten that along the way. So what do I say to you, young men? You go to church. You go to church. You go to church.
I go to church when I'm home.
Okay, so you're away now. Now the interview switches here a little bit. You're away from home. You know what you do when you're home. It's the same scenario. When you're away to school, you don't follow your teaching.
Right.
So does it hurt not to find a church in close proximity and worship?
For me, it is pretty hard because I do go to a Baptist church. I go to Trine Baptist Church in on Huntington Park.
Okay.
And to come out here, it's funny because I've been in Catholic school since 5th grade actually, and it's been kind of weird to combine, the religion I have with another religion. But I have my grandmother's spirit. My mother's always told me I'm cut from my grandmother's spirit, and that what I noticed from her is that she never knocks anyone other's religion. She never.
And that's right. That's true.
She has
That's
always
true.
taught me to
That's
never
true.
disrespect anyone other's religion, and
That's
don't
true.
try to force yours on anybody else.
And that's true.
So
That's very true.
being here, although I may not go to what my school may call as mass, my mother's grandmother, the one I talk about is my father's grandmother, but my mother's grandmother, she sent me here with a Bible that has gold trimming on the day of my baptism, and I've had it ever since. And what I try to do is I try to keep up with that and read as much as I can in my life.
And the reason why I asked that question of you, because earlier on, students from Cabrini, Eastern, would come to the Baptist church up on the corner.
Okay.
And they would visit. So you don't see that anymore. So that's why I asked the question. You don't see them coming in in service and worship, or just to see, I need a fill. I'm reading my word. I'm being obedient to the word. I'm being obedient to my grandmother. But sometimes I don't understand it. So where do I get a little more understanding? It's getting noisy now. The boys are fighting. No, it was nothing. to make you feel uncomfortable. I just used to seeing, we used to see the college students visit the church in the community. So that's something we don't see much anymore either. So that was the reason the question. Yeah.
Just one more question. How would you like to see students and the younger folks give back to Mount Pleasant community?
Well, let me reverse the role. How would you like to give back to the community of Mount Pleasant? It's not what I see. It's what is it that you could do? What is it as you as a student could do to give to this community? What would be your donation to the community?
For one, to be more respectful to the citizens of Mount Pleasant and to positively influence them.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
For me, just to encourage people to, I guess, get more into community service, because that's what I'm all about, community service, giving back what has been given to me, because I know my mother's always told me that everything I have can be taken away from me. So I just hope that if that ever does happen, and if I ever do hit rock bottom, that I know since I've given back to the community one day, if that does happen to me, that I have a safeguard.
Yeah.
So I would definitely just encourage people to look after, say, the smaller neighborhoods, because the bigger neighborhoods I feel as though will be taken care of some way somehow. But I think we as people need to take care of the smaller ones ourselves.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Ms. Byrd. We definitely learned a lot. We got a feel for you, and
A lot of good quotes.
yes, we can definitely use. So I can honestly say this, I'm pretty sure both of us, you have definitely inspired us to definitely continue our community service work here.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yes.
I'm happy to hear that.
So thank you so much for
Oh, you're
everything.
welcome. You're more than welcome.